Cybersecurity podcast is first in 2023. This is Jeff King, Chief Strategy Officer for the Prancer Intelligent Cloud Security Platform. Our podcast format today is focused on a quick 30 minutes discussion on hot cybersecurity topics, hopefully giving your company and your security team some tips on how to be able to address key factors that we're all dealing with in this cybersecurity world. Today's podcast guest will be Joe Vatican, EVP Engineering and Sales, Cloud Security Platform Strategies for Lighthouse Cloud Solutions. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks. Thanks for having us here.
Great. And Larry Whiteside, Chief Information Security Officer for RegScale, a technology that helps organizations continuously comply in real time with multiple compliance requirements. Hey, Larry.
Hey, how are you, Jeff?
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. The topic today has certainly been in the news. You got T-Mobile talking about that latest breach being based off of API security vulnerabilities. It's the fact that the top challenges really are causing 2023 to be a real interesting time right now. So we want to talk a little bit about pen testing cloud applications and being able to see maybe get some actual tricks of the trade from both of you on how to deal with doing this in a more effective way. So in that case, hey, Joe, Deloitte says that taming the cloud chaos will be a top 5 focus for corporations in 2023. I mean, that's something every day in your operation. So what's this taming stuff? What's involved with the cloud? It should be just simple.
Yeah. So, over the last 10 years, people have been moving into the cloud environment. But over the last couple of years, with the remote workforce, it had been significantly, people have been shifting into the cloud. With that said, while digital transformation continues to happen, a lot of the security components have been left behind, or they haven't kept up with the processes or the technology or the techniques that needs to be evolving as you move into the new transformation phases, right? So anytime you take on technologies, your attack surface increases, then you try to mitigate by maintaining and containment around it, and up leveling everything you do from an operational perspective. So I agree with from what Deloitte has mentioned about taming the cloud, so to say. There is going to be a significant hygiene improvement on the basic level from cloud management from a security perspective, and also refactoring some of the applications, because there has been significant amount of companies that did a lift and shift rather than redeveloping, re-architecting solution stack that is utilizing some of the native capabilities that comes out of the cloud ecosystem, with the CSP ecosystem, whether it's Azure, AWS, or GCP. So I do see going back to the basics as attacks are increasing. And it's not, today's attacks are very different, right? Very targeted, a lot of state sponsored. Also, like from a bot AI perspective. So all the tools that are coming into the market for enterprises, they're also being utilized to do actual execution, even from an attacker's standpoint. So it's a good, I wouldn't say good, but it's an interesting times. And then there's a huge marketplace in the dark web and the deep web, right? That people can just buy services to do all kinds of disruption in this space. So there's going to be a significant amount of hygiene base. So we are going to go back to square one on improving our security hygiene in the cloud market, in the cloud environment. And it's not going to be the assumption where you move into AWS and AWS is going to take care of it. There's both customer responsibility and a customer client responsibility, right? Where AWS manages up to a certain point, and then client has to still take care of their data, still has to configure all their environment. Now, I know CISA is pushing down with Jen Easterly and stuff, pushing downward a lot of the rules and regulations with software vendors and CSPs to secure the offerings right off the bat. I do think that will come sometime later this year as things are getting heated up from a CISA perspective.
Okay.
No, so it's interesting. I want to jump in on this a little
Yeah,
bit, right?
that'd be
So
great.
I look at this from two different spectrums, right? The one spectrum was when the cloud started, we had companies like, because there was this whole promise of, hey, the cloud is going to save money. You need to move to the cloud because it's going to reduce your infrastructure costs, it's going to reduce your technology costs, and it's going to help you grow your business faster, blah, blah, blah. So you had this side, right, was like, woof, and ran to the cloud like it was free cheese, right? Like we're in, right? You're giving out free food stamps, but like it's free, right? We're going. Then you had this end over here, right, that just dipped their toe in. And then you had a number of people in the middle. But all of them, the entire spectrum of them, forgot about security. They thought, okay, we're going to the cloud and the business is going to do this. And we're right. All these SaaS apps started being built and we started buying SaaS apps and we started having shadow IT grow and the cloud just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And then threat actors started saying, ooh, the cloud, like it was a buffet for them now, because now they had three primary cloud service providers that weren't doing any security. And all these people that moved to it without thinking about security, they said, wow, we've got a smorgasbord of companies and data that we can just go after because nobody was thinking. And so now the entire industry of technology is to say, whoa, number one, we didn't save as much money as we thought we were going to save, right? This is actually becoming more expensive. Number two, dang it, we need to do security. Once again, foiled, right? Where we weren't able to go out and get all the things that we thought we were going to get. We've got to implement this security thing. And so we're back to square one, just like we did in regular infrastructure days 25 years ago, where we were throwing all these servers up and we were building all this, hardware, and security wasn't being thought of. And then all of a sudden, we had to take a step back and we had to re-architecture. And so that's where the cloud is. It's basically the same thing that we did in the 90s, right? And the late 90s and the early 2000s all over again, but in this new cloud infrastructure.
So it's interesting because one of the topics today is pen testing. And it sounds like you would place that as the same thing as we did in 1970s. The technologies, go through kind of how pen testing is done now on with manual processes.
Yeah. So today, pen testing is done like it's this once in a one point in time look and view at your organization and your infrastructure, right? We've used it as a, hey, I want to see how bad I am, right? Okay, you get the pen test in, you get the report, and you say thanks, and then you get this report and you show your executive committee, you show the board, whoever, see, look what I did, look how bad it is, give me money. And then you try and go fix some, and then a year later, and most people are doing this just because some regulation is telling them they have to do it. So they get it done that one time, and then when the clock circles a year and they come back and they get the pen test done again because the regulators are telling them they have to, they get it done again. And 80% of the things are found all over again that still existed, right? And so the problem is, because it's a point in time, as your infrastructure changes, right? Not only do you introduce new ones, but if you haven't closed the old ones, you still got a problem. So now a year later, they've got the same ones that they had, but now they've got new ones because they had new applications that were stood up. They had some that they have introduced new vulnerabilities. So a penetration test, if you think about it, it's similar to any aspect of a health check. We all know, we all go to the doctor once a year and we go for our annual physical. But we all know that technically, in between our physical every year, there are multiple times that we go to the doctor because we got a hiccup, we got a cough, or something hurts, something aches. But we don't think about pen testing in that way. We don't think about pen testing as it's really a good health check on the visible aspects of vulnerabilities that you have in your environment, right? Even if you're just doing it from an internet-facing standpoint, which is where your largest threat lies, is that visible threat landscape. If you just do it from that standpoint, you'll reduce your risk so much, but you've got to continuously do it, because with the cloud and the ability for people to make changes on the fly and so quickly, it's changing rapidly. And so doing it at a point in time or even doing it quarterly is not going to keep up with the changes that are happening in the environment.
Joe, when you look at the actual cybersecurity needs for the cloud systems you put in there, are you also recommending ways to scale up to some of these massive environments that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely, right. So we, as we work with the enterprise organizations, we are in the deep space, in the runtime and the automation space all the time, right? So we are always recommending automated tools, but we are also running into organizations that want automated tools, but they're not mature enough to consume those tools because their processes are still manual, right? So that there's this, I mean, I will say a good segment of the cybersecurity products that are coming out, they all have built a lot of automation behind it and risk levels and remediation steps and code that can you can grab and implement to improve the baseline. But on the other side, as a consumption from a client perspective, the maturity is not there for them to ingest that information or auto remediate or auto heal. A lot of these capabilities, it's just the maturity is not there. Now we have been seeing improvements in the pipeline, so the people have been taking some of this telemetry that's coming out of these tools and putting it in the pipeline and baking it in the front of it. So I think with tools like automated cloud pen testing, I think it's going to significantly improve some of that burden that's being carried out by executing in a traditional manner and going into a more automated, continuous manner. Like today, like you got to set up red teams, internal red teams, or bring in third-party organizations like Mandiant or FireEye or Coalfire, whatever, right? HackerOne and stuff like that to set up these motions where it's like a 2 week to a 31-day engagements depending on when you start what type of application, man in the middle attacks and stuff like that, or even scraping through the wires, right? To figure out like where the vulnerabilities are or where we can to move laterally across. So it's very much like build, deploy, test kind of a model rather than being in front of it, going all the way to the shifting to the left and being part of the process and getting that improving that baseline throughout that motion. So I think moving continuously is where it's going, where everything is trending, right? And it's
Yeah.
becoming very developer focused, which is great. I do think that it's going to take us some time for us to get there. But back to what Larry said, right? One of the important things he said was people do it today only because of a lot of the regulatory compliance. I mean,
Doing the pen testing.
yeah, PCI, SOC 2, whatever the compliance requirement, a lot of them,
Name it.
they will just do it for the sake of it rather than becoming a religion around it, right?
Right.
You got to get this into the make it into a religion as part of your security process. And unfortunately, I would say a good half of the organizations out there, it's just a checkbox today.
I mean,
Yeah.
Gardner's saying that the API abuses are going to be one of the most frequent attack vectors that are happening now. Why is that APIs such a easy target now, Larry?
So APIs are such an easy target now for the following reason, right? It's if you think about how we connect today, right, versus how we connected in the past. In order for you to connect from one application to the other, right now in the cloud, API is your connection mechanism. But if you go back and you need to connect one application to another, you had to set up a site-to-site VPN. You had to pass protocols across that VPN. It was a far, far more difficult process, and it was very direct. You didn't have this piece of software that was built to create interconnectivity that's invisible, right? Previously, when you connected applications, it was going through one firewall and another firewall or VPN appliance or something that had logs and things that you watched, you reported into your firewall or into your SIM, and you had visibility into that. Today, people don't have visibility into the APIs. And so you've got APIs to third-party applications that sometimes you don't even know exist. And there's so much data. You add to that, the cloud has enabled us to do so much data wrangling. So everybody, if you think about GDPR and all these things have come up around privacy and other regulations because the amount of data that organizations are capturing, right, to be, from their perspective, be better for the consumers that are utilizing their brand. They want to know more about you. And so being able to capture all that data and then utilize different components of it in different ways with third-party apps to try and be smarter on how they serve their communities, it's great in theory for their business. But when you have all of these different data sets being connected in many different ways, and you have no visibility into what that connector is, how it's built, the threat actors are loving it. They are eating it up because what now they don't have to attack an application. They don't have to go and figure out the code. What is this application written in? What exploits can I find in that particular code language that the app is written in? No, they're like, hey, this is an API. Attacking, if there's 1,000 APIs in one application, all it takes is one of those APIs for them to be able to use that as a vector to get to the application itself.
So it sounds like you used to play defense all the time. Now you're suggesting, wow, we better get on the offense on our process. So, Joe, when you deal with your clients and setting up your cloud systems, do you go all the way through? I mean, you mentioned that it was build, deploy, test. Are you thinking test comes sooner in your suggestions and strategies?
Yeah. So, testing should be part of the continuous build, right? We are in the CI/CD kind of a world right now, right? So some of the in the runtime space, you're constantly baking security up front, right? And when you bake it up front, you kind of like you don't waste cycles like before you deploy into production and before you go production, then test it. You're not wasting those cycles. So you're building this infinity loop of CI/CD pipeline and baking all of those security capabilities, code, monitor, improve, and back into the fold, right? So as organizations, so over the years, we went from lift and shift to refactoring applications and really building applications with Docker containers, Kubernetes, microservices, and so forth. That gave us the ability to do some of those functions in that manner, and also shifting all the way left from a security perspective, which includes API, right? API requires keys, and keys have to meet, and all the handshake behind it. So, however, the developer organizations never, their goal is to build applications as fast as they can,
Yeah.
and for the speed of business to compete in this global market, which we all understand. However, security was kind of lagging at first, right? All many years, security was lagging on truly understanding what was going on in that space and taking one step at a time rather than a policy change across the organization about how should this, as new technologies come in, how should we be managing those security risks going forward. So, and fast forward now, we have security organizations that are up to speed on a lot of these technologies and what needs to happen. However, what we are seeing is, we still need like security. We still need empathy towards developers, so to say, because they're still catching up, right? They're still they want to work with security organizations, and security organizations want to work with them. So there's this, now we are seeing some interesting times where everybody's kind of coming together, kind of like what we predicted like 10 years ago, right? Like system admins to DevOps, right? Kind of now it's DevSecOps kind of a motion that took off like a dozen years ago, but now it's truly happening in the enterprise organization. So API, I think a lot of what we are going to see is a lot of the threat vectors and that threat models being standardized every time applications are being built, even in microservices, Kubernetes, or Lambda, or serverless. Doesn't matter what it is, right? Going down to any kind of event-driven programming that's happening, or no code, low code, or whatever. So we are going to see all of these things combine. However, the testing coming in play as part of the engagement, as part of the development lifecycle, being part of it rather than being one of those gated areas where you just go through and go to the next and once a uh, one-time assessment. I think those things are going to become more and more continuous basis as we
Excuse
move
me.
forward.
Yeah,
Bless you.
let me paint a picture for you. Thank you. Let me
Yeah.
paint a picture for you, right? Because I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you go back to how we began this entire thing, what used to happen was the coding teams and development would develop an application. They developed an application and release it. And the security were like, hey, we didn't see that. We didn't know you were developing that. Hey, oh, okay. So then security would deal with it in the QA environment, even though the app is already live, deal with it in QA and say, hey, we found these issues. All right.
Right.
Okay. Well, we're going to put that into our pipeline and we're going to release those fixes at our next iteration. Great. Right.
Great.
That was the beginning of this. Then it became, okay, security got integrated into the process. Okay, we've got a version that we're writing the code. Hey, here's the first iteration. It goes into QA before it goes live. Security finds these issues. You go back and fix those. It goes live. Then security looks at it again. Hey, we found some more problems. Okay, we're going to build that into our pipeline, but the app is live. You did the first iteration. You didn't find any, so it went live. Just because you found more, we'll figure that out as we go. Right now, where we're at is security is now integrated. So when I've built application security teams over the last 5 years, they've been integrated with the dev teams. So when they are doing their scrum boards, when they are doing their iterations every 2 weeks to look at security is integrated in there. I've always had an application security person at the table with them talking about the things that they're doing, the security implications. How are the keys being stored? How are keys being passed? Right? How are the identities being used? How are we creating these things? And how are we building it? So it's iterative throughout the process where security is at the table. What we need to get to, and where I hope to see us at some point, is when an idea is thought. So at ideation, right, by the CTO or whoever it is that's coming up with the idea that we need to do this. A lot of times it's the business executive that when they come up with the idea, they say, hey, security, we've got this idea. Can you come meet with us to talk about how we move forward on executing this in a secure way? That's the stage the industry needs to move towards, because once we bake it in an ideation, right, it now becomes part of the framework, right? And it's built in from the idea all the way through. So as they're writing code, because what that leads to developers beginning to understand, right, the actual components of security that need to be integrated up front, versus while they're writing code, a security guy saying, hey, have you thought about this? Because developers aren't completely educated on security and all of the components of security and all of the things that what they do can impact, right? And so that's why integrating security
changes every day.
it does, and it does, and so they've got changes in development and in coding that they've got to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard for them to pay attention to all the changes in security as well. So having that integration, but if you build it from ideation, where when you are sitting at a board drawing out what this is ultimately going to look like, you've got all of that up front. So they're going to understand, oh, we've got a key management thing that we've got to build in. Oh, we've got identities that we need to worry about where the identity store is. Oh, we've got all these different components that we'll think about early, right? Versus thinking about it in the moment. Because when you think about it, when you are writing code and you have to think about it in the moment, it's a lot harder than it would be if you plan for it up front. And so when you're writing the code, because it's already in your head as you're writing, you know that's something I have to do.
Well, Joe, there's 15,000 APIs that an average corporation is getting into. So it's not just a matter of catching it beforehand. It's the matter of being able to double check everything and being able to secure those, because one alert will change an API's structure or vulnerability in an instance. So, I mean, what are the key factors from your side that Larry just talked about? I mean, obviously catch it early, but you still need to fix it. You still need to have it do it quickly because it's too big.
Right. No, it is too big, right? And it is too dynamic in nature. So, that's why there has been an explosion of cybersecurity tools in the market, right? Uh, because there's especially with cloud environments, uh, if every single service within the CSP was a product, we would have 300 product companies today, right? Just within AWS or just within Azure or whatever. And those are all like openings to the attack surface from an attack surface perspective, right? Because they could be as part of it. Uh, One of the basic things I would like to emphasize is, as organization, at minimum, should utilize some of the frameworks that's already available to understand what this means, right? MITRE attack matrices. There is a that's available for Azure, O365, SaaS, IaaS components. Also, Cloud Security Alliances, they have a pen testing playbooks that's readily available for AWS and Azure. Taking those playbooks and then integrating tools like Prancer for cloud penetration testing, automated ways, it's one of the ways to manage a penetration program in as you develop, as you integrate into the developer lifecycle in the operational realm of things, right? So all of these things has to come into play. Now, there are specific things within Azure and AWS that's very unique to that environment, right? There's user enumeration, there's guest Azure AD access, sensitive data hunting in Azure resources, and then typical things like ports and vulnerability scanning. And those are things, some of the activities and attack surfaces that within that CSP itself. Now, when you have automated tools, it will give you a constant feedback telemetry for you to improve your baseline into your development lifecycle, and that is something you need in a continuous format. Without it, I think it's going to be very hard to do just one point in time as every application goes live like the traditional way. Uh, I think it's going to exhaust the team quite a bit to go back and operate in that manner in general. Then building this new habit of high iterative development. Security has to become that way too, right? So security telemetry has to get feedback into the feedback loop uh, on everything that we do from a observability standpoint and visibility standpoint, and also from a testing standpoint with tools like Prancer and so forth.
Okay, I just want to reiterate. So, like in Prancer, we'll talk about using intelligence in the discovery process,
Right.
using intelligence in the actual attack emulation, being able to use the latest and greatest hacking tools or the latest and greatest codes, codified library that we have. Then we actually take that into an actual a risk assessment. And I think, Larry, you talked about that being really important to make sure you're not calling out something that is really not as high a risk as it used to be, being able to verify that, taking that into an actual remediation, which I think both of you are saying is essential because the DevOps teams are not going to be able to stay up with that, and then being able to go and report and do all the things and keep track of all of these changes so that you can come back and, Larry, like you said, 12 months later, hey, this is the same stuff. What we haven't done anything against it. So That's the one of the areas that we are that we hope that we can alleviate some of these things.
So and that's the point that everybody needs to take away here is we've got to move to a continuous and iterative model of everything we do. Right? Compliance, security, pen testing, assessments, all of these things need to be continuous and iterative, right? And you have to have a loop by which you not only find, but you remediate, and all of that has to have an aspect of documentation that continue to be updated. You can't, because to a point Joe brought up earlier in the conversation was, a lot of organizations, I don't care how much automation they create, their back-end processes are manual. And so they have all this automation that then generates reports that then people deal with manually. And if you generate a report that somebody then has to manually execute upon, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Right. And so finding ways to begin to create this loop where you have this automated testing, automated discovery, automated risk assessment component, automated remediation, repeats, right? And going in this cycle. And to be clear, everything's not going to be able to be remediated. So some you have to figure out what can you accept, right? But identifying it is so important, being able to label it as a risk and then determine, is this something we accept? Is this something that we can't remediate? So then what are the mechanisms we can do to mitigate? I know many, many times over my career, there were vulnerabilities and there were findings that I just couldn't fix. The software was too old. The vendor that we bought it from wasn't going to change it. It was too critical to the business. So we couldn't update it, right? So we had to put a wall around it. We had to, do something different other than patch that Windows 7 device that was on a medical device in a hospital room, or so there's always something, but it's got to be this iterative process and this loop that continues to go around. And if we don't do that and we continue to have these manual injects where that stops the process because we've got this manual thing and then stuff never happens, we're going to continue to fail.
Well, we're at our end of the time, and we didn't even go into zero trust type stuff that is happening. That triggers a whole nother set of concerns when you're talking about the old types of software or old types of systems. Now you got new types of systems that you still don't know what to do with. So, I mean, any quick thoughts on the zero trust side, Larry, from what you're seeing?
Yeah, so for me, everybody, it's interesting. I've had this conversation a lot. Zero trust for everybody you ask can mean something completely different, right? Yeah. And so everybody defines it different. For me, zero trust is a principle, right? It is a principle. It is, right? It is developing trust layers, just like we started this entire industry of cyber with defense in depth, right? Create layers of security. Right? Based on those layers, you give different layers of trust. That's all it is. Zero trust is starting at zero and then building up layers of trust based on certain things. Today, with technology, we've got so many more things that we can use to identify a person, a device, and those types of things. So it's just how many layers of trust do you want to build, but start at zero?
Yeah. Start at zero and verify. Right. So I completely agree with that. And it's a journey, right? It's not one tool or 10 tools or 100 tools, right?
Right. You can't flip a switch like it. That's what everybody thinks. I'm gonna flip the zero trust switch, right? That's gonna work. Yeah.
And that speaks to the continuous being checking, and zero trust is not just a button.
No, it's not a button. It's not it's a journey, right? That we are trying to go through to get to an outcome, which makes us more secure and have more observability in the space on understanding what's really happening in your environment. So, but Larry's right. Everybody has a different definition of it, and the more obviously with the trend in the market and stuff, it's become a buzzword now, but there's actual a true journey towards it that I think everybody is striving to get to.
All right. Well, just letting everyone know, the pen testing and zero trust, Prancer is the one that is addressing that issue, and it is one of the only ones that can be used in that process. So we're looking forward to future proofing lots of different cloud applications. Joe, go ahead and go out there and start building up some really complex cloud systems so we can implement the Prancer and be a part of their solutions. And Larry, looks like you've got a few things on your list to keep doing with your clients, and certainly appreciate your giving us a perspective of the challenge, and then certainly the some of the things that are going through your head. I know both you present in conferences and are on top of a lot of these things, and very interesting to hear your perspective. We've gotten a couple comments from our audience about they enjoyed hearing your perspective. So I really appreciate you taking the time out today. And now I got to send you back to go fight the bad guys again. So, all right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here. The Red and Blue Cybersecurity Show from Prancer is meant to be able to deliver and give tips and strategies to our friends and guests out there. And we hope that this triggered a fantastic way of, hey, making the rest of your week. Now they have to go and do all those things that Joe and Larry said that's important for them to make their cloud secure and the API secure. So, well, with that, I'll say sign off, and thanks everyone for joining us. We're planning one of these every month and being able to show more tips and more securities, because it's Joe and Larry. It's kind of endless, isn't it?
It is.
It is.
Okay. Enjoy, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for being part of us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Thanks for having us. Later.
Yeah.